Once again, just select to all the class 11 students. So today we will start with the third fundamental rights of the Indian Constitution, that is right against exploitation. So this right is very much related with the exploitation which occurs in the society, where a less privileged and underprivileged peoples are being targeted by the other fellow human beings in order to fulfill their own interests and make money out of them. So this right is against the exploitations. So there are a number of exploitations. There are many forms of exploitations which occurs in a society, especially in a, if you take an example of India. So since India is one of those countries where there's a number of people who are struggling to elevate themselves above the poverty line. So there are a number of people who are still under the poverty line. So which makes the which makes rich people to target them easily. So they became the victim easily under the for exploitation. So there are a number of many forms of exploitation. So the first one is beggar and forced labor without payment. So these forms of exploitation, mainly in this form of exploitation, the kids are being targeted, in which they are forced to beg for the money, and they are quite often forced to work forced to work without any payment. So this kind of actions are considered as an exploitation, where children are made to beg for them instead of going to school. So this is one of the most common exploitation which occurs in India. Now the second one is buying and selling of human beings and using them as slaves. So another name for this exploitation is human trafficking. So you might have heard about that human trafficking, in which human beings are being sold to other people for the purpose of slaves. So that they can become, keep them as a slave for the lifetime. So this kind of practice were very much common in a way back in 2 centuries. If we look back in the 2 centuries, but still there are new forms of slaves which is being practiced across the countries. One of the best example is Nepal and India, where the girls and the women were sold and eventually sold with the promise that initially when they were taken to the other side of the border from Nepal to India, they were being promised to give a good job, and eventually they ended up in a brothel business, prostitute business. So these are some of the practices which are considered as a exploitation. Okay, so slaves can be of someone who works for them as a domestic workers, but it can be of sex slaves, where the women are being targeted and they are being sold to other people to work for them as a prostitute. Okay. Now the last one is employment of the children below the age of 14 years in the dangerous jobs like factories and mines. Now here it is mentioned that the children below 14 years, it is not allowed to make 14 years below a child below 14 years old in a dangerous jobs like factories and mines. So if you might come across a children who works in a factories or mines, so it is okay for you to complain or report these incidents to the higher authorities, since this is one of the exploitation, and it is crime to make a children to work in a dangerous jobs like factories, where it is very where the people have to work in a very what do we say, in a dangerous circumstances, and minings as well. So in these areas, it is not allowed for any company or any institution to hire a kid who is below the age of 14 years old. Okay. Okay, so our next right is right to freedom of religion. So this right ensures that every citizen of India to practice or follow any religion. Okay, so since India is a secular state, as we all know that India is a secular state, by secular state, we mean to say that in India the state should not take any particular stand in the matters of the religion. Okay, so when it comes to the matters of religion, state should be neutral. Okay, state should not be promoting any particular religion or being biased towards any religion. Since India is a land of a country where the citizens are following a different religion, there are several religions. So it is necessary for a state to extend the respect or the treatment equally to all the religion. Okay, since India does not have any official religion, so it is necessary for the state to not to favor any particular religion, whether it is a Hindu, whether it is a majority dominant religion or the minority religion. Okay, so despite of all that, state should not be taking any particular stand on a religion, or should be preaching any religion or propagating any religion. So state should be neutral in the matters of the religion. So which ensures that there is a equality of all the religion. Despite of any religion, there should be, despite of the majority and the minority of religion, there is always a dominant and the minority religion, right, in every state. But in order to ensure the equality of all the religion, states should not be taking any particular position or treating any religion, particular religion, in a favor. Okay. So the next one is freedom of faith and worship. Now, the freedom of faith and worship allows a citizen to follow any religion or worship. So under the freedom of faith and worship, it ensures also includes the freedom of conscience. Right? Conscience means a person can, and as in India, a person can choose to follow any religion, or if the person do not believe in any religion, then he can also choose not to follow any religion. It is not compulsory for every citizen to follow any one religion. Okay, any one religion. It is also under this right, under the freedom of conscience, it is also made possible for person who do not believe in a religion. So then that person can choose not to follow any religion. So it is up to them. In short, we can say that it is up to the person, individual person, to whether to choose or follow any religion, or if he do not believe in a religion, then he can also choose not to follow any religion. So this right is guaranteed under the freedom of conscience. Right? Now there is certain limitation there can be a certain limitation imposed by the state. That means this right is not absolute. It can be imposed and restricted at certain point by the state. So there are certain limitations on the freedom of religion. For example, a state might interfere in a religion if the religion is practicing, religion is promoting any evil practices. For example, you might have heard about the sati system, right? Sati system and child marriages, which is quite common in the Hindu religion. The tradition has been followed from the many centuries. So these are some of the evil practices which should be abolished, even though these are the religious matter, right? These are the religious matter, but these are some of the practices which also affects the society. So, in the matters of the evil practices, the states can impose certain restriction or may interfere to abolish all these practices. Now, you might have heard about the sati system, right? Now, sati system in which the woman, widow woman, has to sacrifice her life for the person who is already dead. So these are some of the evil practices uh, which is subjected to the Hindu women's in a society. So, in order to prevent all these practices, state might impose certain restrictions. That means we can say that this right is not absolute, and even though state does not take any particular religion or being favored to any religion, they can impose certain restriction when it comes to this social abolishment of social evil practices. Okay. Okay. So our next right is a cultural and educational right. This is the fifth right of the Indian Constitution, the fundamental rights of the Indian Constitution. So this right is not meant for every citizens of the India. Rather, it is meant for the people who falls under the minority sections. So this right is mainly for the minorities. Therefore, it is a right of minorities. Okay. Now, as we all know, that India is known for its diversity. So people are following a different religion. There are people who follows different religion and speaks different languages. So it is a land with the diverse sections of the people. Okay, so it is also known as the land of unity and diversity. So it is united by all these diverse sections of the people. So since India is a diverse state, it is not possible. It is impossible to have all these sections. The number of all these strength of all these sections are equal in a state. So what I mean to say is, there is a sections of the people who are being outnumbered by the other sections of the people. For example, Hindus are being considered as a dominant religion in India, right? So there are certain religions which are considered as a minorities, like minority religion, like Buddhist, Jainism. So these are some of the religion which are considered as a minorities. So minority can be of religion or it can be of ethnicity. There is a different ethnicity in the religion, in the regions of the territory of India, and there is a number of languages which are being spoken by all the members of the society in India. But there are certain languages which are considered as a minority. So which is being outnumbered by the dominant languages, right? So as we all know that Hindi is one of the dominant language in the India. Now, in order to, as we have learned in the first chapter, that the framers have put a lot of effort to make a fine constitution. So while they are making the constitution, they have also realized that their strength, the India's strength lies in the diversity of the nation. So diverse section. Now, in order to protect this diversity, it is very essential for the state to promote or protect those minorities. They are being endangered. They are in the danger to being outnumbered by the dominant religion or dominant languages or dominant ethnicity. Okay. So, in order to protect those minorities, government have the constitution have provide a right, especially to those minorities, to set up the institutions. Now, these are some of the measures taken by the constitution, or which is being provided by the constitution to those minorities to protect their own identity and their own languages and their own religion. Okay, so in order to protect those their identity, the Constitution allows them to set up the institution, set up any institution meant for the protection of, right, protection, or we can say preserve their identity. Okay, now in order to make it possible for them to protect their identity and their unique culture, Constitution allows them to set up an institution for the protection of, or we can say preserve their identity, in which in those institutions they can teach their own languages in order to promote among their own sections of the people. So by minority, if we go through the minority definitions of the minority, minorities are those groups that have common language or religion in a particular part of the country who are being outnumbered by the other social section. So definition of the minorities is very simple, that it should be the group should be good, the group should have a common language or the common religion, and they should locate in a part of the India, any part of the India, and who are in the who are under the danger, or we can say who are outnumbered by the other social sections. So there are a number of sections which could pose a threat to their culture by outnumbering their section. Okay, so basically we have learned from this topic that this particular right is mainly for the minorities, and by minority we mean to say the group of people who have common languages and religion in a particular part of the country who are outnumbered by other social section. So any section which is being outnumbered by the dominant culture or language is known as minorities. Okay, so in order to allow them to preserve their unique identity, the Constitution allows them to set up their own institutions through which they can protect their religion and their language. Okay, so the last right that we are about to discuss is right to constitutional remedies. Now this right is one of the most important right out of all the right that we have already discussed. So this right is important, most important, because what if one of our fundamental rights that we have already discussed is deprived or violated by the state or the government? What should we do, right? So there should be a certain way to revive our fundamental right or get justice. Okay, so therefore, through this right, we can revive our fundamental right, whether it is being exploited or violated by the state or government. We can revive through this particular fundamental right. Okay, through constitutional remedies. Now, remedies here means in order to cure something, like which is being this term is quite often used in when it comes to cure our wound or disease. We need certain remedies, right? So likewise, when our constitutional rights, the fundamental rights are violated, then we have this remedy, right to constitutional remedies, through which we can revive our fundamental right. And this right is considered as one of the most important, from the fact that Dr. Ambedkar, who is the prominent leaders of the contemporary history of India, has also mentioned that this right is heart and soul of the Constitution. Okay, so by this very statement, we can realize, or we can understand that how important this right is, this particular right is. Okay, so under this right, the Constitution has assigned the Supreme and High Court to protect the fundamental right. Now, what if our fundamental rights are being violated by the state? Then we can approach to the Supreme Court and High Court to get justice. Okay, and once we approach the Supreme Court and High Court, and according to our cases, the Supreme Court will issue a writ, W-R-I-T, writ. Now that means it is a written order which is issued by either Supreme Court or High Court, not a local court. Okay, it is also assigned only to the, or this authority has been assigned only to the Supreme or the High Court. Okay, so they will issue a different kind of writ according to our cases. Okay, so there are a number of written orders. Likewise, the first one is habeas corpus. Habeas corpus it is a Latin word which is derived from the Latin word, and it means to let us have the body. Now, once the habeas corpus is issued, the court is demanding the police to release the person who is detained unlawfully. Okay, who is detained without any procedure. So if the person feels that if he is being detained by the police without any proper ground or without the procedure, or without any proper procedure, okay, so the person can approach to the court, and court will issue a writ known as habeas corpus to bring the body, or we can say to bring the person who is detained in the police custody. So in order to give him a justice, the court will order a habeas corpus to present the arrested person in a court. Okay, so now the next writ is mandamus. Now the mandamus is a writ which is issued when the court finds that courts find that the person is not doing any doing something illegal in their office. So there are a number of cases in which people have misused their offices for their own interests. Okay, by taking a bribe, or by allowing their own family members to work in the office. So these are some of the actions which can be restricted by the court by issuing a writ known as mandamus. Okay. Now the next one is prohibition. Prohibition means it is a writ which is issued when the court finds that. Now, if we closely examine or look at the structure of the Indian code, okay, so Indian jurisdiction, we will find that there at the top we're going to have the apex court, that is Supreme Court, and after that we will have a higher court, and under that there is a local court. So according to this hierarchy, these courts have certain jurisdiction which can be solved only by them. So there are a number of cases which can be categorized, but all those cases are divided or assigned to each court. Okay, so Supreme Court has the most power and it can solve any cases, and not. But if we talk about the local court, then there are certain cases which are not allowed by the Constitution to the local court to resolve the cases. Okay, So if the higher courts, suppose if the Supreme Court finds that the local courts are dealing with some cases which doesn't come under their jurisdiction, then they will going to issue this particular writ, that is prohibition. So though doing the law, he see the also court mambo Supreme Court, High Court, local court. The some of law jurisdiction law jurisdiction of the social case so chair is top down in the what is law over it? What the pump is so chair with that. The local court chiki law he see any case to handle chair or the top down the money in the Supreme Court of Bajmena, the Supreme Court the case how hoina and Kachile was you get rich prohibition and the Dina issued by the higher court when lower court has considered a case beyond its jurisdiction. Beyond its jurisdiction. The deal of the social jurisdiction Megone, Gane and social Mego Gane case Shivaji, the salt chair, Tapshi Choina, Dil Choina, any Gane, we can't cut the prohibition which break the case was the door Shoina, Habeas corpus Leoina, so the Javalana, Mijik detention, Yogic, Suranja, Code now, mandamus the if court find any illegal duty by office holder consideration by the office now illegal duties chingo and the magic how goina and the zoza mandamus unit and consider the issue chain and medicate and that the prohibition of the rate the Karelana any on the law and she court lower court chiki and socio jurisdiction any case in the salt chairs Tapshichana or the doing prohibition. Now the co-warrant. Now this particular right is issued only when the person is not eligible. Now there's a number of cases where the person is not entitled or eligible enough to hold that particular post. Suppose if there's a person who is not eligible enough to hold the post of Prime Minister. Suppose, just giving an example. Suppose if there is a person who is holding an office of Prime Minister, but he doesn't have or entitled enough to hold that particular office, then the court will issue a writ known as quo warranto if they find out that the person is not entitled to hold that office. If the person is not capable enough to hold that office, then the court will issue a writ known as quo warranto. Okay.